There we go.
Okay, we're now recording. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for the Doctorate of Organization Development Change Symposia series, as well as the All Things Change podcast webinar series. And we're here to talk with our distinguished guest, Dr. William Brendel, the assistant professor at Penn State, talked with us about the M.O.S.T, the MOST assessment and career coaching to make the most of your career in OD. Now, this has been a fascinating project that he's been working on under the umbrella of the open source OD. I got to take part in his launch a few weeks ago, and we are now honored to have him here to educate us on some of his new developments. So with that being said, I will pass it over to you, Dr. Brendel.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Katie. I'm going to share my screen and just jump right into the good stuff here. Let's see, by show of chat, if you have taken the inventory, this assessment, share what your preference was, what your title was. So you might be a Renaissance consultant, you might be I know Matt is a creative amplifier, I'm a humanity hawk. So share what you are. I want us to get a sense of who's in the room. All right, stealth improving. Sherry, you know what you do? If you didn't get your results, it may be in your spam folder, and if you don't get it there, I can look it up in the back end. So you know, there's always a way. All right, so lots of Renaissance consultants. Sherry checks spam. I'm gonna have to look back again. I'm sorry, Sherry. Excellent. More Renaissance consultants. Great. Yes. Great. Okay, so we have, oh, that makes sense for you, Carol, 100%. You and I have sister preferences.
Yes.
Now you're probably wondering what's with the person, we don't know if it's who it is, a man, and who knows, but somebody's in that space suit. And what's up with that? Why do I keep using that spacesuit as like the logo and everything? And I'm going to get into that in just a little bit. And I want you to just remember this, that MOST stands for Mastering Organizational and Societal Transformation. Okay, so whenever I say MOST, that's what I'm referring to. All right, let's go to the next slide here. So if you spend any time on social media, you see lots of memes, and I couldn't even fit all the memes that I looked up when I typed in memes that have to do with organizational change. There's just billions of memes out there. And what that tells us is that people are yearning for change. They yearn for meaningful change. They're not happy with what's going on in the world right now. I mean, that's an understatement. We have the world's on fire. We have war. We have pandemics, we have systemic racism, we have, I mean, the list goes on. And here's the deal. We have over 144 programs across the United States and the world that deal with organization and development and change. And this, I mean, if I don't, say so myself, OD, organization development and change leadership, they go by many different names, and there's crossover and curriculum. However, OD itself, I think, gives us the greatest chance at leading change in the world, and that has a lot to do with the way OD is structured. Its unique approach, its collaborative approach and caring, right? And member-driven change that increases buy-in and quality of the change. And I'm not going to give you a lesson in OD, but OD is probably our best chance at making Yoda happy on that previous slide. So, and there's of course, there's many different ways to change society. You can do it through organizations. You can do it through efforts aimed at society itself. The problem is that one size doesn't fit all. So I don't know where you go, to school. Penn State's program is a little bit different than Bowling Green's, and Bowling Green's is a little bit different than Hawaii Pacific. And sometimes there are big differences, but there are some core courses that you find in these programs. The same is true for jobs. So if you go out, this is fun, go type in Google organization development jobs, and you'll find a lot of different titles for these jobs. Now, the standard answer that professors will give, which is not, not too far off, is that you could work internally as an OD person. You could work as a consultant, right? And then people might get a little fancy and say there's work that you can do that might not be called OD, that accommodates all kinds of HR, et cetera. There are tons of jobs out there, and one of the issues is we need the big picture, right? So one of the things you can do to get the big picture is to step back. And this is actually a live picture of the International Space Station over St. George, Grenada. What do you notice in the chat room when you take a big picture look at things? What do you notice? What comes to mind and to heart? Oops. When you see the Earth like that, what does that make you think and feel? I noticed every time I click on the chat, this pauses. Small. Interesting. If you ask people to look, oh, I see the small stuff. Patterns. Yes, absolutely. You see patterns, right? So I'm going to kind of save the mystery here and kind of keep moving. When we think about professional perspective, it's the same thing. It's easy to get overwhelmed by millions of memes and programs and curricula and jobs. It's overwhelming. But if you take a big step back, right, what you begin to see are, well, first of all, you begin to get an appreciation for how much we yearn for meaningful change. And that's very powerful. And my research team and I have been doing that for a long time now and have just become more and more excited about what we're seeing. You also begin to see that you have more options, right? So right now I live in Minnesota, but looking at this, Venezuela looks a lot warmer to me and might be a different option, right? The same is true with OD careers. I'm going to show you how that looks in just a second. And I think it was Katrina Sitar who brought up the idea of patterns. And another thing that we see when we take a step back and look at the profession is there's just absolute complexity, but also the patterns are elegantly simple. And knowing where you fit is a real gift. And I've been trying to help my students and colleagues figure that out for a long time. And then finally I said, I got to do something about this based on data and take a real big picture here. And of course, connections, right? You get a sense of how we're all connected. Now, opensourceod.com, some of you may have been to the launch party for that. Some of you weren't able to make it. Carol, I'm looking at you again. It was tough. We had to find one date, but I encourage everybody to go to Open Source OD because it's all about the big picture for OD. And there are three big things that we're working on. The first is the most meaningful careers assessment and coaching. And many of you have taken the assessment. I'll help those who couldn't find their assessment. That's not your fault. I'll help you find those probably right after this. I'll go in and find it for you. But what this is all about the big picture for careers. And we've also created something called immersive learning circles, which are simulations. I'll just kind of touch on that at the very end of this, that are designed to help you get the big picture and understand what it means to lead adaptive and caring change. It's not as step-by-step as some make it out to be. If you're practicing OD for any amount of time, you realize that you deal more with adaptive challenges than technical ones, and being able to step back and see the big picture. We utilize these simulations to help people learn how to do that. And then finally, we have innovation labs at Open Source OD. And that kind of grew out of, I don't know, my own little wanting to see new approaches to OD. We kind of have the usual suspects. out there, right? And they're all good. They're good things, right? You've got dialogic, you've got appreciative inquiry. But I think it's time to take a step back and create new creative practices. So Innovation Labs creates a space where you can do that. It reverse engineers OD so that you can basically piece together certain tools and concepts and create brand new OD interventions and get all kinds of credit for it and be celebrated. So when you get a chance, check out opensourceod.com. So that's our 20,000 foot view, or maybe more, with the space station for today. So today what I'm going to talk about I'm going to just very briefly introduce the open source OD crew. All right, that's important because there are a lot more people behind this than just me. We're going to talk about the diverse OD career landscape, some critical patterns and connections. And then we're going to talk about your career calling. So for those of you who have taken the assessment, we're going to make some sense out of that. I'm going to show you how to sort of interpret it. And then I'm going to help you draft. I don't think we'll have enough time to complete it. In fact, you should think a little bit more than a half an hour about your career vision. But we're going to take elements from your report and put together a very strong career vision for you. Here's the open source OD crew. Now, here's some interesting things. If you look at the bottom of their little profiles, you see that each of them have their own preferences. So we are diverse, not only by race and gender, but also by our OD preferences. And the neat thing about this crew is that it's open. And so this is not a Penn State endeavor. This is open to everyone and anyone who wants to get involved. This is cross-university. I happen to serve as in a leadership position on the OD Education Association. And we're inviting people from Bowling Green, Pepperdine, everywhere. So if you'd like to join our cause, hit me up, let me know, find me on LinkedIn. And I'm sure Matt's going to share the PDF of this presentation with everybody so you can find all sorts of links and goodies. We'd love to have you. This is not a group of people creating something for aspiring and transitioning practitioners. It's a group of people developing it with them. And that's very powerful because what we're focusing on mainly is meaning. So we've been looking at this point, I think we're getting way past 500 career actual job descriptions in OD. These happen to be just a smattering of jobs that come from industry, but also societal focused jobs. So that top row right there are corporate positions. So if you're an achievement ace, for instance, that would probably be more appealing to you, according to the assessment. On the bottom, you see a number of societal focused organizations. And by the way, of course, you know, there are groups that are in between, and we'll talk about that as well. But some of us have leanings, right? And this is sort of like, this assessment is a lot like the personality style assessment, with one important exception. There's always room for growth. And that's where dialogue and coaching basically has this multiplier effect on what you learn in your report. So keep that in mind. And also we went onto the OD Network website, which has thousands and thousands of external consultants. So this is a smattering of websites of, people who do OD consulting proper, so to speak. So we call those pure OD folks. And we analyzed this particular population as well, because people don't just do internal, they do external. All right, now this is the big show right here. So remember, zooming out, International Space Station, that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to get the big picture, and we're going to understand where we are in relationship to the field, to jobs, to approaches, and to each other. And I'm going to explain a little bit and contextualize how this works, okay? Because as much writing as I put in these reports, it's always better to have somebody sort of explain it. Eventually, I'll get a video out there for you all, but also just entertain dialogue and answer questions. So First thing, patterns. Remember when we looked at Earth, we see patterns. There are patterns with OD careers. So looking at all of these careers out there, we stepped back and we said, what are some things that we see coming up over and over again that create differences? So like the difference between land and sea and clouds, there are some really big fundamental differences in OD jobs. And these are the four main areas, okay? So outcomes, people who work in OD, whether internal or external, tend to lean toward a specific set of outcomes. It's the change that they want to see in the world, okay? So if you took the assessment, you probably remember some of the questions were about, would you rather work on organizational health and employee well-being, or would you rather attempt to address systemic racism, right? So those questions get to this feature, and we have leanings, okay? Then there's identity. So one big thing we can't ignore is that, you know, us academics, I wear an academic hat too, we like to call it organization development, and many of us get upset when we see the term organizational development. But the truth of the matter is that those professions that are called organizational development outnumber pure OD by just an astounding number. And not all of those job descriptions are created equal. Some of them blend things like talent development, strategic HR. So there are hybrid positions that are out there. And we took great care to make sure that we knew where pure OD leaves off, where hybrid begins, and then where hybrid leaves off, and then sister professions or adjacent professions like IO psychology, human resource development, where those begin. So this, again, is a leaning. You could be pure or you could be hybrid in terms of your preference, right? So this is the livelihood that the sort of profession that you'd feel comfortable in at this point and stage in your career. Then in the bottom left, you have approach. So if anybody out there has been studying OD for some time, they probably noticed that there's a difference between classic approaches, which are highly diagnostic, very much coming from the behavioral science standpoint, needing to concretize certain things, lots of surveys. And then you have dialogic OD, which is very much about, instead of understanding specific things, it's about creating new containers for meaning. And then there's conscious OD, which is my little neck of the woods. And that is, Carol, the consciousness raiser, will know that what I'm talking about there is rising above those containers altogether and letting go of them. Instead of seeking ideas, you receive them. That's a very different orientation to change. So classic OD is diagnostic, innovative is dialogic and consciousness-based. Another reference point for conscious OD would be Theory U and the work that Otto Scharmer is doing. And last but not least, not all jobs need to learn everything and every tool about OD. I mean, some of them just use one, right? So there are a lot of practitioners out there who get the fundamentals of OD, but they just use appreciative inquiry because that is what they love to do. And it's okay. It is what it is. Others have wider tool belts and enjoy the freedom of being able to pull from different tools. And it's all good. So my philosophy here is it's all good. This is the world of OD as we know it right now. Okay. Now, depending on where you land, right? Because if you look at this by the numbers, there's two choices for every one of these four leanings. So depending on where you land, there are certain connections that appear, right? So in fact, because there are two for every one of these four, that yields 16 different combinations. And what's super cool about this is that when you look at all the analysis we've done with jobs, those jobs fit into every single one of those buckets, and they're unique. So jobs that you would find for compassioneers, for instance, are fundamentally different than creative amplifiers. And that has a huge implication for the way that you develop your career vision and mission and plan. So there's not a one size fits all here. And what we're trying to do is basically create guideposts and resources to help you develop your unique preferences and talents. So for instance, if you look at patterns, I put little pink stars. Let's say you are interested in societal, hybrid, classic, and specialized. Then you would be like me. You'd be a humanity hawk. To me, this is my authentic expression. If I could wave a magic wand, this is the OD that I would do. This is like my vision for OD. What I'm good at, I can totally be a Renaissance consultant, which is pretty much the antithesis of this. But this is what's genuine to me. And of course, there are examples of actual jobs that fit this particular pattern and group of connections. So let's look at the left side again, and we look at organizational, right, pure, innovative, and broad. What if you score the exact opposite? Then you would come up with the genuine calling of Renaissance consultant. And look at the jobs here. They're completely different. In fact, you see a flip. You see more external consultants in this category than internal. And Meta, of course, being Facebook, is just like light years ahead of everybody else. Love them or not, this is what they're dabbling in. And there are jobs at Meta for Renaissance consultants. And I know a lot of you scored that way. So you know what I'm going to do? I realize there's a lot to this. So I'm going to ask you to write your questions down as they occur for you. And then I'm going to try to leave enough time at the end to kind of go through your questions. So there's 2 reports that come out of this when you take your assessment. And you probably noticed this. You get an email, and in email, you've got a link to what's called your career calling report. That's like the heart of your career. That's like the change you feel you're meant to bring about, the approach you feel most in sync with, right? So there's the career calling report. The other report, which is actually in your email, is your competency report. And that report shows your strengths in OD competencies, as well as your interests. And that's really important. And it also shows average strengths and interests for everybody who's ever taken this assessment. Both of these are used together for career coaching. So I'm going to kind of show you like just sort of like the mountaintops of these sorts of things, and I can always get into this a little further. So for the career calling report, let's stick with societal game changers. I know we have a bunch of societal game changers out there. When you click on that link, you see a career calling report, and there are treasures on each one of the tabs that you see at the top. And what I did was I decided to concentrate those treasures on an introduction to your calling, right? So contextualizing what you're interested in and giving you more to read and listen to and try. Then there's state-of-the-art knowledge that is related to your calling. Then there are actual frameworks and tools, and depending on whether you're interested in classic OD or innovative, surveys, dialogic techniques. Then we have practical career know-how. So it's how do you do this work? And then finally, ways to boost your career. Now there's a little secret here that because you're here, I'm going to let you in on this secret. And I don't let this out of the bag because it's a little tricky, but being an educator, it's important. If you're looking at this, you should be critical and say, well, can't you be both a Renaissance consultant and a societal game changer? Can't you do a little bit of all? Can't you be both classic and innovative? And the answer is yes. And that's a more advanced form of OD. So I call this ways to boost your career because what I do on this tab is I add all of the things that are outside of your preference, okay? So here you are getting inspired, you're building your tools kit, you're working along, you're looking at jobs, you're so on and so forth. But then there's this tab that says, all right, we get it that you're interested in diagnostic, but if you really want to up your game, and balance it, check out these dialogic, these innovative approaches. And the opposite is true. So you get what I'm saying. This is like my little, way of trying to balance the ship a little bit more, even though there are leanings according to the data. So the neat thing there, if you're thinking about this, is that this assessment can actually help to drive a balancing of the field. This doesn't exist yet. This is something brand new, and that's kind of cool, I think. That's sort of my dream. Now, how in the world did I curate specific treasures for 16 different, preferences? You can imagine that's like kind of like a headache, right? Well, it's actually kind of easy. So in this case, you have a societal game changer. And a societal game changer has specific aspects. So when we look through tons of resources, number one, we want to make sure that they're legit and they're based on rigorous research, and they're not fads. Okay, that's the first thing. But for a societal game changer, does this systems thinking for social change make it into that, this is just one of many resources? Well, we asked ourselves, does it focus on societal change? Clearly it does. So that's a given. Does it look at broad mastery? Well, anytime you're doing systems thinking, you're automatically doing broad mastery. So yes, check. Are we looking at innovative application? Absolutely, because it's looking at complex problems. And is it pure OD? Now, this is a little bit of a trick question. This could be, you could name it anything, but systems approaches to change are as OD as you can get. Because if you look at just about any model of OD, you're looking at aligning system, structure, culture, leadership, etc., for the health of the organization and its prosperity. So this is how we do it. Now check this out. I added this fun little animation here. We're also curating people. So if you are a societal game changer, you can actually access a whole social area dedicated to societal game changers. And you can find that link on the last tab of your assessment report. And in there, you can post jobs that you find that are, in that societal game changer realm, media. Eventually, I would love to have employers actually come and post jobs and have an assessment for the type of employer that is looking for those jobs and connect them directly with people and be a little bit of a match.com for OD. But again, that's way off in the distance because we're just getting started. All right, so that's all free, right? So that's kind of, I don't know, I like that, and I give it to all of my students and colleagues now, and I think they're finding it helpful, but we're always improving, again, because this is open source. So remember that second report I talked about, the career competencies report? All right, there are tons of competency models out there in OD. Tons, like I think over 30 at least, but there are 11 really good ones, right, that have been developed through rigorous research and top names in the field. So which competency model should we use for this assessment? Well, what I found when I was going through all of these competency models was, number one, there's not many assessments out there. This is more of like a checklist, right? Number two, some competency models have things that others don't. So for instance, some are very expressive about DE&I, and DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion competencies. If you look at the global competency framework for the OD network, you'll see that loud and clear. It's spread all throughout that framework. In some, you'll find more of a stress on behavioral science, but not in others. And in some, you'll see a stress on ethics more than others. And in some, you'll see a stress on use of self more than in others. So I said, okay, wait a second. I don't want to compete with these competencies, these competency models, because they're all brilliant and they all have many different directions you can go in. So what I decided to do was create something. I'm calling this a supra competency model. It brings it all together. Okay. And so you have the full enchilada. And in looking at it, you can, depending on your results, trace back to any one of those earlier models and hopefully later models as well. We also looked at 40 different definitions of OD. There are more than 40 out there, but we had to stop at some point. And then we did content validity study with 8 renowned experts in the field of OD to make sure that these competency areas are legit. And so we took red pen. I was telling Matt about this. We took red pen to what we had created, and I almost had a heart attack because it was a lot of work. But then, that's the way research works, right? And then you improve that assessment further. And we're running tons of focus groups with practitioners as well. And the OD Education Association has an actual guide to the types of things that should be in every OD curriculum. So I looked at those as well. And these were the big things that came up. What's interesting here, if you're an OD geek like I am, is that the patterns that come up are socio-technical influence. So if you've studied socio-technical systems or influence, there's the early, the Kurt Lewin aspects of the field show up. So when we zoom out and we look at the earth, right, we're doing this with OD, these are the patterns. We are seeing a living, breathing representation of Kurt Lewin and all of these socio-technical systems folks in modern OD, which I think is super cool. And that's how we organized it, because it's kind of a neat way for anyone who's studying OD to look at these different competencies. And so the report that you get in your email looks like this. It's broken down into these 3 areas: socio, technical, and influence. And as you see here, there are 3 for each. And you have a score in terms of your interest, because that's one of the things we measure. And we also look at your strength. Now, this whole thing is based on your interest. It begins with you, it ends with you. The goal is finding you an OD career or scholar practitioner livelihood that feeds your love, that invigorates you, that keeps you engaged and makes you better at what you do, especially when you're facing any type of adversity in your work, right? Because if you love your work, you do it better. So we start with interest, and then in coaching, we look at your strengths. And now it's a matter of matching those specific patterns of strengths and interests with an actual career path and trajectory. So we're not going to get into that today, because that's a real coaching type of conversation, but I wanted to show you that there is the competency feature here. Now, how does the coaching system work? So the first thing is we need a good vision, right? And to understand your vision, you need to know yourself. You need to know what your center of gravity is, the force that you embody, the type of energy you want to create in the system, the human system that you'd like to work with. You should know also your orbit. What type of change are you orbiting around within specific areas? And what approaches really make you feel most alive when you're doing them, okay? And that's different strokes for different folks. So no 2 visions will ever really look the same. Now, vision's not enough, right? We need a practical and economical way of moving toward the vision. So if you've ever done strategic planning, you need some reference points, right? So you've already got those. You've got your reports, okay? So that's your reference point. But then what you need to do is align your mission with your vision. And your vision generally, if anyone studied, strategic planning, your vision basically stays the same. It's like the North Star in the sky. It never changes position throughout the night. But your mission can change slightly here and there as you work your way toward that direction. And so having a mission is important, and being flexible, strategically flexible with that is super important. And we cover that in coaching as well. And then, of course, to be very Lewinian about it, There's your environment. There are the conditions on the ground. If you're going to be a consultant, there is your own unique guiding framework that produces a sense of thought leadership in the world for you that is unique. And the types of desired outcomes you want to create, and again, your strategic flexibility. And again, that all changes over time. And finally, as part of the coaching system, we talk about different maneuvers. So how do you search for and attract careers? How do you trick those algorithms in social media so people find you? And there are ways to do it. Networking and marketing and thought leadership and all these good things. So I won't dwell on that because I want to get into the vision, which is what we really want to focus in on today. So your career vision. So I've already started coaching, and this is kind of fun. Here's a really good testimonial that captures the type of alignment we're looking for with this coaching. This is somebody who is highly trained and skilled in OD. So this is someone who's coming in with a lot of knowledge. But of course, coaching, we accept everyone. Even if you don't call it OD, you're just generally interested in leading change. So a career vision, what we're going for now I want you to really kind of zoom in on this, because this is what I'm going to ask you to do and participate in. It feeds your passions, okay? Like you're moving towards this. This is your North Star. It demonstrates your versatility, and it differentiates you from other practitioners who hope to transform human systems. It also means that you know yourself in a very deep way that enables you to attract and seek particular experiences and learning opportunities that continuously align with your values. It's very hard to be everything to everyone, even if you're like a Renaissance consultant, right? How much can you actually will in one situational setting, right? So what is the core value that you lead with that is your anchor? And then finally, it's your ability to articulate your values, to be known for embodying these values through your work. And so that's super important. Here are the vision and mission that Barry created through the initial coaching sessions. So you get a sense of what this looks like. And I'm going to break it down for you in a little bit. Okay, so just take a second to look at that. How does that strike you? What comes up for you when you look at that vision and mission? Why don't you type your thoughts in the chat? By the way, vision, very motivating, deep sense of perfect purpose. Oh yeah, trustworthy. Absolutely, very different. Just I'll let you in on another secret. What I did to create this piece was I looked at all of the best authors and more recent authors on developing visions and missions for organizations. And I kind of took the best and I mushed it all together, and I tailored it for people. Very meaningful. Exactly. Now, could you guess from looking at this vision which preference Barry is? I don't know if you've been studying this closely enough yet to be able to do that, but look at the first part of her vision. So Barry is a creative amplifier. And you see that in the very first part of her vision statement. Okay. All right. So that's kind of fun. How many of you out there are doctoral students getting your PhDs? Can I get a thumbs up or a yes in the chat if you're doing that? Crystal, Katrina, Sarah, all right. Catherine, Raynell. Oh, yeah, we got a bunch of PhD students in here. That's great. The world needs its PhD students to push to push and expand the field. Jordan is in there too. So this is the fun thing. The other day I did coaching with a PhD student, a first-year PhD student, and here is her testimonial as to what this process was like. So just take a second to read that if you're, well, whoever you are. I think this is fascinating for anyone. So one of the unique things about this is we're not trying to force a one-size-fits-all to OD on people, unless they want to be everything, right? And then they're probably a Renaissance consultant. But instead, we start with the talents you already have, what your strengths are. And that's the whole point of this, is it's based on that. And so what happened for Tehniet is her actual dissertation topic went from being very sort of general to very specific. Now, your career, if you're doing a research career, if you plan on being a scholar practitioner, you want to be able to still feed and energize, but you also want to locate your research agenda in this universe of theories. So one of the first things you do with like a literature review, you've got to sort of delimit your research and find the specific area of real estate that you want to focus in on. And that's one of the first things that you can do. But also, again, knowing yourself and creating this inspiration and feeding it with all of those cool elements that are in your report make you like, I'm going to get this done. You're excited about your dissertation and you're excited to add something new to the field. And again, the ability to articulate your values, but also particularly for PhD students or even master's students, the ability to debate them and critique them. So this is super important. So Tehniet's before was to study employee engagement in healthcare settings. That's what you came in with, and that was sort of like, this is what I want to do. But after that, you'll see it got much more specific, and this is what professors like to see. And again, we're not down to mission yet, but the vision is to study the relationship between nurse burnout and characteristics of agile teams in emergency rooms. And the coolest part was that she was able to go back to her career preference report or her career calling report and find tools that align with her dissertation. So that includes the Maslow burnout inventory. She happened to be a Renaissance consultant. And so you'll find the Maslow burnout inventory, Chris Worley's agility characteristics, and PDFs of real job descriptions in healthcare. So that's where you kind of circle back to that particular report. All right, I'm juggling a lot of things on my screen right now. All right, so how do you develop your vision? So we're going to break this down. And this is going to be almost like a rapid journaling exercise. So I want you to kind of just give it your best shot. You might not be able to do it. We all work at different paces. And that's why we're giving you this PDF to look at later. But just kind of look at what grabs you. Now, first part is your center of gravity. That's your core value that anchors your behaviors as you create an environment for change in a very OD way, right? Safely and inspiringly and collaboratively and you name it. So here's an example, compassion. Compassionately. This is another person I did career coaching with. Stimulate. So what type of influence do you have as you're stewarding the shift in the system? Typically, these are shifts geared towards practices, behaviors, mindsets, and general awareness in the organization. So for this person, the word stimulate comes to mind. Personal insights. This is the energy. This is the rocket fuel that change will be fed by, and for this particular practitioner. And then your orbit is a socio-technical aim of the change that you're addressing through your engagement. So here is a combination, right? Inclusive career development, okay? And practices. So the actual approach is to create and adopt new practices. All right, so that's an example. Now for you, I think what's important, there was a study done 2 years ago on the future values of OD consultants around the world. They looked at 80 consultants around the world, and here are the key values that they came up with, and maybe one of these will be one of your centers of gravity, okay? The way I want you to think about it again is, in terms of a vision, this is a feeling piece, right? Coaching gets you to the doing and the practical and economical piece, but this is like the drive. We're trying to stimulate you here. And one way to think about this is that we all have an inner poetry. So I picked a little poetic quotation for each of these, right? So awareness, innovation is another center of gravity for OD practitioners. Integrity, courage, trust and respect, diversity, clearly, collaboration, practicality, and growth. Now, there are numerous ways that you can think about your center of gravity, but your goal, and this is the hardest goal, and I don't expect you to get this done today, is to find one, right? Like you're known for this, right? You come in and you are, I don't know, Mr. Courage, right? That's what people know you for. You're able to, if you've ever read Ed Schein's Humble Consulting and you read some of the cases, he was very courageous in what he did and how he would notice things and the impetus, I don't know what the right word, the genesis of process consultation. He would say, I noticed that you just interrupted that person. That's pretty courageous, right? So what's yours? So you might jot this down. And again, you can look at the PDF later to zoom in on what you'd like to really think about it and reflect on it. Of course, it always helps to talk too. So, feel free to reach out. Then there's the energy. Remember the energy we were talking about? So what is the energy that you're producing in the human system that's driving change? Is it the esprit de corps of the organization that you're trying to get to bubble up through your engagement? Is it conviction? Maybe this, you work with groups that sort of are wishy-washy on change and you want to really get them into this mode of conviction. So you could look at these as well. And what is the force? Now, this is very, very Star Wars in terms of a term to use, but there are different types of forces. And in this sphere, in any type of change sphere, you'll notice that there are masculine and feminine forces. There's a yin and a yang. Some like to go in and encourage. It's a more of a proactive force, right? So to advance, right? To encourage, to boost. But there's also a feminine energy, which is an invitation. And if you scored innovative on the approach part of your assessment, you're more likely to be for me, it's very much about an invitation. It's letting go and letting come. So what is your force? What's the force that you're going to be known for and lead with and try to cultivate? Now, orbit is where we start to get really specific. There's lots of ways to work with, human systems. If you break apart those 40 big definitions of OD and distill them, I'm not saying this is, the definition of OD, but if you distill those other definitions, generally speaking, you're moving toward the strategic, ethical, and the spiritual success of an organizational system. So this is like way zoomed out, right? Way zoomed out from the earth. The well-being of employees as well, and also performance and some type of arrangement. And this is different for different people. And then, if you're orbiting a lot more closely, parts of that you'll see coming up in OD work are like agility, empowerment, equity, of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a big piece. Meaningful work, collaboration, and sometimes combinations of these. So understanding your orbit is very important as well. And understanding that there's a lot in between. So the coaching aspect of this really gets into helping you articulate what your orbit is and how you differentiate yourself. Then if you look at your scores to give you a sense of what your orbit is, there are people who are orbiting organizational change, right? So this is your outcomes piece on your report. These are actually the not the questions, but the items that you rate with Likert scale. Then there's societal change. And then there is the in-between, where it's both organizational and societal. And there are some really unique jobs there, like B Corps and corporate social responsibility and special initiatives, like working for Bombas socks company or Timberland. So there's that in between as well. And we talk a little bit about approach. So there's the classic approach, and there's the innovative approach. And what you want to do is find, where are you on that spectrum? What would you absolutely love doing on a day-to-day basis? If you could use this sort of like a painter's, I forget what it's called, where you have all the different colors, what would you paint? What would that look like? And depending on your answer, your mission and your learning objectives and your extracurricular activity is going to look different. Now, I don't think we're going to have enough time to do this because we did start a little late, and I apologize. But at this point, again, this is in the PDF. The goal is to go over everything that you are reflecting on and talking about with other people. Maybe it's your professors, your classmates, fellow practitioners, maybe you're mentoring people. And you put it together. You just string it together and you wordsmith a little. And then out of that, the next step is your career mission. Okay. And the goal here is to align it with your vision statement. And it should be clear and compelling and really a declaration. You're saying, this is my core purpose and approach and what I value. And it's no doubt, it leaves no doubt as the type of change elements you want to engage in. Now, if you are looking at broad mastery, right? If you scored broad mastery on your assessment, this is going to include a lot more, right? And then what I would ask you to do in coaching is to pick like just 2 or 3 to lead with, because whether you're going to be an external or internal employee, you want to be able to match at least what you're interested in changing with real careers. And finally, it should anticipate for the environments you're going to encounter. So all the conditions that are coming up. Now, here's kind of a big picture for you. I'm going to kind of culminate on this big picture. Your vision, right, this particular vision, needs to align with your mission. And anybody who's done strategic planning knows that if there's any misalignment or misunderstanding about words and what they mean in a system, you really kind of, if you're doing any type of carpentry and you're off by like an inch, you could just ruin the entire deck you're working on. It could look like just a total disaster. The same is true when merging your mission with your vision. So you can see that all the elements you're initially working on that we talked about today align with your mission. And in coaching, this carries on. So then it aligns with your strategic plan, it aligns with your learning objectives, and then it aligns with a step-by-step approach as to carrying out those learning objectives. So if you're a PhD student and you're trying to figure out what elective should I take, this is a great way to do it. Or if you are thinking about what extracurriculars should I do that aren't being offered in my program, this is another great way to do that. And the same is true for anyone who's transitioning into OD, who maybe already has a degree, or people who just want to generally get better at systems level change and differentiating themselves. Now, I'm going to ask you a few favors. Matt guaranteed me that I could ask for a couple of favors. One is, I want you, if you can, if you believe in this, this is all free, of course. If you believe in helping people who want to change the world find a clear path to doing it, please go to your actual assessment report. And on the first tab, that Launchpad tab, you click on that LinkedIn button. And what will happen is, as long as you're logged into LinkedIn, it'll open up a LinkedIn share post. And when you share that post and someone clicks on it, it actually takes them to a summary of your specific career calling. This is important for numerous reasons. One is they can go and take the assessment right there, and that's good because we want to drive participation. But also it tricks the algorithms that are out there in the internet into attracting the right types of people and jobs and thought leadership to you. It helps you form your orbit. So this is another thing you want to do. Go trick those algorithms. And realize we're at the very end. So am I. So just give me one more minute. I also want to invite you to jump into an OD simulation. So we've created actual simulations based off of case studies with renowned award-winning practitioners. And Carol, you actually know, I'm not going to give it away, but you know the person that this is based off of. She's an African-American Lifetime Achievement Award winner. Give you some tips there on who it is. So it's like choose your own adventure. Depending on what you select, you are met with new consequences. And this is all guided by a facilitator with a circle of people. So we all meet online through Zoom and we work through the simulation. And I'd love for you to register for this. I'd love to see you there. These sorts of things that we do, they are, pay optional, and they help support. Right now I'm paying for everything, all the web and all this fancy stuff, but it helps to pay for that. And of course, if you're interested in the coaching aspect, which is taking your understanding of your 2 reports to a whole new practical level, please reach out to me. So in a nutshell, for coaching, to wrap up, there are 3 sessions. There are 5 hours total. It's one-on-one with me, but I will be certifying career coaches using the system. It's based on evidence. It's based on matching you with real careers and research strategies. We've got tools. If you belong to an ODEA school, which I think I know that Bowling Green is, between now and January 1st, you get 50% off your coaching purchase. So if you want to lock in time with me, what I'm going to do is just add the little QR code there. You can scan that, and it's the first come, first serve, and there's only one me at this point. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. All right, that I went a little long.